This talk is going to cover the basics of critical thinking. All right, critical thinking is probably one of the most, if not the most important principle that we will employ while we do all of our research, all of it. I don't care what kind of research you're doing, scientific, ancient history, whatever. Critical thinking is key to getting to the foundation of the problem and making progress. Okay, I don't care who you are or what your research specialization is. If you are not employing critical thinking tactics, then you are failing objectively. Now, so for those of you out there right now who are about to press the stop button on this video and go start watching porn instead, hold on, don't go anywhere yet. This video is still for you in the sense that it will be a coaching and a reminder to continue to stay honest using the skills. A lot of people believe that once they start employing something and they feel like they have something grasped, they think they no longer have to seek tutelage in the field, right? You can become complacent with your critical thinking skills and accidentally never grow them. Stagnation and complacency is a huge problem in everything, and it also permeates and plagues critical thinking. So once you've reached a point that you feel comfortable, maybe too comfortable in your critical thinking capabilities, you need to go out of your way to challenge yourself. You need to go out of your way to look for other viewpoints, other perspectives, and other possible ways of executing critical thinking that you can add to your current repertoire. It is extremely important to continue to grow your skills. It doesn't matter what skill we're talking about. We're going to focus on critical thinking, but you need to continuously challenge yourself. And now, how often do you honestly challenge yourself with respects to critical thinking? All right, it's a good question. Remember, ask yourselves questions and be honest with yourselves in the answers. Now, for those of you who are newer to this situation, what this talk will do for you is it will give you a solid definition of what critical thinking is, and then I'll also go over all of the basic tools and fundamentals that comprise the concept of critical thinking. Now stop scrolling through your social media and pay attention. Let's get down to this. All right, so what the hell am I talking about? What is critical thinking? Critical thinking can be defined as the process of actively and skillfully analyzing, evaluating, and synthesizing information to form a well-informed judgment and make sound decisions with respect to whatever it is you're doing. Now, we're going to focus on ancient historical studies, but this skill can be used in everything. It goes beyond simply just accepting information at face values. What it does is it encourages us to question everything, challenge everything you see, and most importantly, think independently. Independent thinking is essentially dead in Western society, if we're honest. What's even more funny about that is that people believe they're thinking independently, that they're unique and interesting, when at the end of the day, they are literally just following social engineered trends. So freaking annoying. All right, we'll deal with the schizo stuff later. Critical thinking. We're focusing on critical thinking. So why is critical thinking important? Why are we wasting our time? Critical thinking is an essential skill that will equip us with the ability to navigate the complexities of our areas of research. The skill set that critical thinking allows us to have is going to give us the tools to make informed decisions, solve problems effectively, and keep us on top of everything that is constantly changing within our field. All fields are constantly changing. Historical fields, ancient history, we're always finding new stuff. So it's important to be able to adapt to all of that new information that's coming from all over the world. It comes from everywhere. You need to have a way to process that information. Critical thinking is what's going to be used to process that information. That's our tool. That's what we do. I wonder how many more times I can put the word processing in a sentence. And if I use critical thinking skills to question why I keep using the word process in sentences multiple times, I could then figure out a way to stop using the word process. I could process the reason why I wouldn't stop using process or something. Whatever. So as you can see, it's important to practice and cultivate our critical thinking abilities. And as we begin to get better at critical thinking, this is going to allow us to better analyze the validity of all of those claims that we're constantly inundated from all over the spectrum of academia and alt academia. All right, we're going to be able to recognize biases better and deal with them in a superior way than we might have before. And we're also going to be able to approach any of these challenges with a more rational and logical mindset. So there's your 10-hour introduction to critical thinking. If you're still listening, you're crazy. But we're going to keep going. Now let's get into all of the tools that critical thinking provides us to navigate our historical studies. And then we'll go over the methodology that is used to employ the tools. There are 5 tools that we are going to use that critical thinking encompasses. You can argue more, I get it. I don't think you can argue less. We're just going to go over 5 so I don't lose my mind and end up killing myself. All right, so the 5 tools are this. I'll name them and then we will go over each individual one in depth. We have analysis, evaluation, inference, interpretation, and explanation. All right, first up, our first principle that we're going to go over will be analytical thinking. Now, analytical thinking is the systemic and methodical approach to examining information, ideas, and situations in a thorough and logical manner. All right, now this involves breaking down complex problems or concepts into smaller foundational components, scrutinizing each one of those components, and then trying to gain an understanding of their interrelationships. Now, analytical thinking is going to require us to ask insightful questions, gather all the relevant data we can possibly find, and draw well-supported conclusions based on evidence and reasoning. Now, all of this probably sounds obvious. You're probably nodding your head or about to turn this crap off because you're like, well, no kidding. This talk is obviously stupid. You're just telling me things I already know. Correct. Remember, repetition is important if you are to learn something and ingrain it into your brain. So I will continue to repeat myself, simply as a psychological trick to make you a better human being. So you're welcome. Remember, I'm here for you. So basically, the more you listen to my crap, the more successful you're going to become, and then the more successful you become means the more rich you'll become, and then hopefully one day you'll look back at me and you'll be like, you know what, that guy made me who I am today. I'm gonna give him all my money because holy crap, he's off. Yeah, okay, shut up. Okay, so why is analytical thinking important? All right, now, analytical thinking is quite literally a cornerstone of our effective decision-making and problem-solving capabilities. This skill is going to empower us to identify patterns, detect biases, and evaluate information at a highly critical level. Highly critical, at a higher plane of existence. Basically, if you're employing this, you're on your way to being some sort of a god. Now, by honing our analytical thinking skills, we're going to become more adept at interpreting the data we run into. We're going to be able to recognize cause and effect relationships and identify underlying trends within all of that stuff. Analytical thinkers generally possess a keen eye for detail. It's going to enable you to make informed choices and find creative solutions to complex problems. I think that gets lost as well in translation when people start getting into all of these studies. Being creative, being able to think from multiple perspectives is an extremely important skill. And in fact, I'm going to have to talk about that later too. We won't cover that here. Stay creative. I mean, stay grounded, but stay creative. You know, evidence-based creativity. Yeah, I like that. Evidence-based creativity is important. That's my word. Don't use it. It's mine. You tell other people that I made that. All right, now let's go over the strategies for enhancing our analytical thinking skills. We're going to want to cultivate curiosity and approach all of our information with a healthy skepticism. Stay skeptic. Remember, keep asking questions, even about stuff that you think you already know is true. Right? Ask thought-provoking questions that challenge everybody's assumptions, yours included. All right? You're going to want to ask those questions so you can uncover hidden biases and so you can get deeper into the heart of whatever it is you're getting into. Remember to engage in critical inquiry. All right? This allows us to see beyond the surface level and discover new perspectives within our realm of study. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to gather and analyze relevant data. When we're faced with a problem or a decision, we need to collect and analyze all the data we can find from hopefully reliable sources. Right? But I hate to say it, but even going outside of what may be considered a reliable source might be worth your time as well. Right? Remember, getting multiple perspectives will always help. Because even if you get a wrong perspective, that will help show you that something is wrong. All right, that can open up other doors. All right, so we're going to want to utilize various research methods while we do this, such as, surveys, experiments, interviews, just collecting all kind of meaningful insights. All right, then we're going to want to carefully examine the data that we've gathered. We're going to want to look for patterns, trends, and outliers that are going to be able to provide valuable information for all of our analysis. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to look into breaking down complex problems. Now, complex problems can appear daunting. It's a problem everywhere. In historical research, ancient historical research, we have a lot of complex problems. All right, there is a lot going on that gets in our way from getting to the truth of whatever the hell the truth is. All right, but breaking down all the stuff that we at least have started to learn into smaller, more manageable components can facilitate a cleaner analysis. It'll help clear our head, basically, and it'll help us utilize more resources towards one thing. If we're not trying to analyze one huge thing all the time, you can still analyze one huge thing. Keep going. I'm not saying stop. But don't forget to analyze the small things too, to make sure that your small things are propping up your larger thing correctly. Then we need to identify the key elements, relationships, and dependencies within our particular topic of study. This brings us to the next part, or the next pillar of analytical thinking. So I suppose we have tools within tools. All right. It's too many tools. All right, so one of the pillars of analytical thinking is utilizing logical reasoning. We have to apply deductive and inductive reasoning to make logical connections, which will then allow us to draw conclusions based on whatever evidence we have. What are these two kinds of logic? We have deductive reasoning. This involves deriving specific conclusions from general principles. Then inductive reasoning involves forming general principles based on specific observations. I guess you could do a whole talk on that as well. We're not doing that right now. Maybe later. Using these two forms of reasoning will help strengthen the validity of your analysis. The next thing we have to do when we start employing analytical thinking is we need to seek alternative perspectives. Now, this can be tough. Why? Because this is an area to where our ego absolutely can get in the way. It is not easy for most people, generally speaking, to look through the eyes of another individual and then take that perspective seriously. But it is extraordinarily important to do, because just because a person's perspective may be different than yours, that doesn't mean they're wrong. And that's something that both the alt-academic side and the academic side have a difficulty realizing. Both sides have good evidence, but they refuse to look through the eyes of one another because they are so engrossed in what they currently believe. So don't fall into this trap. All right, looking for these different viewpoints is important. All right? You want to seek out different perspectives on a given issue or your topic or whatever it is. Look for other alternatives. That does not mean that you have to take them seriously. You might find a perspective that is completely wrong, but it might lead you to the correct perspective through simply being inspirational, right? It may trigger something in you, and that's important. So you're going to want to engage in constructive debates and discussions that challenge your own assumptions. That's important. You want to go ahead and challenge what you believe. This practice is going to broaden your understanding and help you overcome cognitive bias, right? We all have that. And it's going to encourage creative problem solving. Creative problem solving is extremely important, and that probably demands its own discussion. But I do want to reiterate that staying creative, keeping that mind open while you are using these analyzation skills is going to make you a much better analyst. All right, that's enough analyzing. All right, so to recap, right, analytical thinking is a powerful tool that enables us to dissect complex information, rip it apart, get into it, that will allow us to make informed decisions and navigate all the complexities of everything that's going on in the world right now. I mean, everything is changing all the time, and a lot of the times it's not for the best. So it's important to utilize your analytical thinking skills when you start to deal with all of these subjects. Now, by adapting a systematic and logical approach to analysis, we can uncover hidden insights, we can identify effective solutions to our problems, and allow us to dig deeper into all of the subjects that we might be interested in, so that we can get a better understanding of what we're doing. You got that? You good? Does all that make sense? Rewind this if it didn't. Go back and listen to it over and over and over again. I want every single one of you to be an amazing analyst and bring me tons of flawless information. Don't anger me. All right, let's go on to the next part of critical thinking, the next tool. The next skill we're going to cover is evaluation. All right, mastering the art of evaluation, unlocking your decision-making potential. Yes, it's like an infomercial. Unlock your power. All right, so yeah, I know that was dumb. Shut up. Look, all right, we're going to cover the significance of evaluation, and we're going to dive into the practical strategies that we can use to enhance our skills. Now, by the end of all of this crap, you should be well equipped with the tools to assess information, discern between options, and make well-informed decisions. Because if you make bad decisions, then you'll find yourself making a YouTube video on how to do critical thinking. So you don't want to be that guy. Jesus. So what is the tool of evaluation? All right, so evaluation is the systemic process of critically assessing information, arguments, and options to determine things like their credibility, their reliability, and their relevance. It's going to involve careful examination of evidence. You're going to want to analyze. Remember, we just taught you how to do this, how to analyze things. So you're going to want to analyze strengths and weaknesses of your subject. And then you're going to weigh the various factors to make informed judgments. Now, effective evaluation enables us to make sound decisions, logical decisions, solve problems, and navigate all the garbage that we have to sift through in order to find any kind of truth. See, I need to evaluate my speaking skills because they suck. Now, how do we employ all of this? I've just gone over like 20 minutes of trying to describe what evaluation is. And I'm sure most of you have already turned this off, and I'm now talking to myself. That's fine. I don't care. I'm going to keep going. All right? I'm going to persevere by myself. Now, how do we employ evaluation skills? What do we need to do? Now, the first thing we want to do in evaluating is we want to define a purpose. It's important that we clarify purpose of our evaluation. What are we evaluating? Why are we evaluating this? Don't waste your time evaluating things that are not relevant, right? We want to understand what we're evaluating and why it's important. This kind of clarity is going to help us focus our evaluation efforts and determine the criteria against which we can assess all of our information and options. Find a purpose. Next, we want to gather all of the relevant information that we can find. Collecting all of the pertinent information related to whatever we are evaluating is going to be important. Obviously, we need evidence. Once again, I'm going to say it, I'm going to repeat it so that you don't forget it. Now, you want to make sure that all the information you find is as reliable as you possibly can get. You want to make sure that it is credible. Now, of course, we will use critical thinking skills to evaluate those pieces of evidence as well, which is kind of one of the problems with getting into true critical thinking, is because you can basically critical think until your head explodes. Because you have to employ it against everything you do. You need to employ it against the evidence, for your outcome that might affect an outcome that you might have to reanalyze over and use critical thinking skills on again to prove that maybe all of that was wrong. Ugh. Jeez, alright, so gather the relevant information. Consider using a variety of sources. That's important. Don't just get stuck in your world. We've gone over that. Make sure you're going out and looking for different perspectives. All right, make sure you're looking for other research studies, other expert opinions. I hate that word now. Just other opinions of people that seem like they're at least involved with the subject to a serious degree. First-hand experiences are good. In fact, that's extremely important. In fact, I would argue that's probably one of the best sources you can get. What do I mean by that? So if you're somebody who is studying ancient Egypt, right? Or you're into the pyramids, for example. But if you don't ever go to see the pyramids physically, how are you ever really going to make an informed conclusion on anything if you don't even have a first-hand experience? Now, you can go get first-hand experiences from other people, and obviously we want to do that. But I also want to make sure that everybody understands to go try to get those first-hand experiences for yourself as well. That is actually important. I don't think nowadays enough stress is put on you as the person going physically to the location or whatever it is or wherever it is you're studying to truly gather information for yourself. The reason why that is because nowadays everybody has this horrible psychological degradation of thinking that just because they could see it on the internet, they have access to the full story over there. I promise you, visiting the pyramids in real life is completely different than seeing it on a picture. So go get that experience, that first-hand experience. And of course, get it from others. Both. It's all important for your evaluation data collection. When conducting an evaluation, it's going to be important for us to establish a clear criteria or a set of standards which the subject we are evaluating can be held up against. This is your filter. When you evaluate something, you are filtering out fact or fiction. You are trying to find if it's worth spending your time on, I guess, ultimately, but is it worth something to your current topic? Now, the criteria that you're going to be making these judgments on, they should be relevant, they should be measurable, and they should align with the specific purpose of whatever it is we are evaluating. Doing this will ultimately provide us a framework for assessing our subject, and then it will help ensure consistency and objectivity in our evaluation process. Now, during the evaluation process, can't even say the word, evaluation. During the evaluation process, data and evidence are collected and analyzed, we now know how to do that, to assess the subject against our established criteria. This is something you're going to see in critical thinking. All of these skills in critical thinking, they all are interwoven. So if you think you can get away with only using like 2 of these things, think again. You're using all of them for the rest of your life. It's over with every single day. What the hell? Basically, creating a framework that you understand needs to be the backbone of your evaluation. You have to have something to evaluate. You have to have a set of standards to evaluate whatever the hell it is you're evaluating. So make sure you have that. And don't be afraid to change it. Alright, so you get evaluation. We can move on. We could talk about this all day. There's circular stuff in here. I'm not even going to bother with it. Alright, so overall evaluation is a systemic and rigorous process of assessing the quality, value, or significance of something based on our established criteria. So all these little details that I just spoke about, all of these are important to building up your general evaluation skill. Now, as your evaluation skill increases, what are you going to get out of it? All right, you're going to get buff. You're going to stomp around, be alpha. You're also going to make informed decisions about your topic. You're going to improve your performance, not only mentally, but physically. And you're going to enhance the effectiveness of your arguments when you go up against somebody else. Now let's move on to the next tool, which is going to be inference. All right, now inference, what the hell is inference? Inference refers to the process of us drawing conclusions, coming to a conclusion, or making a judgment based on evidence, reasoning, and prior knowledge. It's going to involve us going beyond the explicit information provided, and basically we use it to fill in gaps to form logical and reasonable understandings of a situation or concept that we are dealing with. Now, what the hell does all that mean? So for an example of inference would be as if we look at the mainstream academic timeline and we see all the problems with the timeline. We can then infer that mainstream academia is lying to us. That would be inference. So basically, we can fill in gaps, or attempt to fill in gaps, with information and knowledge and evidence that we already possess. And then that can lead us to other avenues of exploration. So inferring is going to be important while you begin your deductions, or inductions. Now, we've already covered both deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning, so I won't bore the crap out of you again with that. You're probably already ready to kill yourself like me, so let's move on. Now, inferences can also cause us harm. So while we may infer something using logic, reasoning, evidence, etc., like we should, we can also fall into the trap to where we end up being influenced by our own biases, wrong assumptions, or just flat out incomplete information that we might just be truly ignorant to. So just keep in mind that even though you are practicing, critical thinking, using your inference skills, you might still be wrong. So ultimately, you have to find yourself applying critical thinking skills to your critical thinking skills. All right, that's enough about inference. So basically, if you're inferring something, you're using all of your data that you've uncovered, all your evidence, all your logic, all your reasoning to try to fill in the gaps of whatever subject it is you're working on. That's inference. Let's move on. Let's get out of this. All right, the next skill that we have to deal with when we're dealing with critical thinking is going to be interpretation skills. Now, interpretation refers to the process of understanding, explaining, or translating the meaning of something. Right? This something could be a text, a work of art, ancient artifact, ancient buildings, ruins, events, any kind of information, etc. Now, all this is going to involve us analyzing and making sense of whatever the subject matter is that we are trying to interpret by considering its context and its underlying messages, and potentially its implications for what it means. All of this is going to require us to draw upon our knowledge, our skills, our perspectives, etc., to extract a meaning and to uncover insights that might not have been immediately apparent in the first place. Now, this is the strength of interpretation. Because here's something that's interesting. Interpretation, I suppose, could be considered subjective, but your subjectivity might be what gives you the creativity to go down a path that other researchers haven't gone down before because they were locked into whatever BS they believed in and did not want to interpret it in other ways. Yeah, I digress. So that's interesting. So interpretation will often require us to consider multiple factors in whatever it is we're doing. Now, these factors are going to include things like cultural, historical, social, personal contexts, scientific contexts. In fact, I think scientific context should probably be the number one thing that we now employ in all of our skills. Interpretation is no outlier in this. Now, all of these contexts that we take into account, they then in turn shape the way our information is perceived and understood. And what this highlights is our ultimate possibility of subjectivity instead of objectivity within our interpretation. Just think about that. Yeah, it's interesting. So interpretation actually really does shine some light on the objective, subjective nature of everything that we do. Yeah, we're screwed. Okay, holy crap. Moving on. That really does shine some light on something interesting. That subjectivity, I mean, because as different individuals, we're going to interpret things completely different based on all of our, unique perspectives, experiences, biases, even our unique evidences, right? Evidences, is that a word? All of our unique evidence, whatever. Everybody's going to have different perspective, which is then going to mess with your interpretation due to the natural subjectivity. So this is something you need to be aware of, man. This is serious. Man, every time I think about critical thinking, something new pops out. That's why I say, keep listening, go keep finding things about this stuff. It's amazing. Just talking about it blows my mind. So I guess what we need to also do then is we got to stay rigorous in our interpretations, We need to stay grounded with our evidence. Keep our logical reasoning as logically feasible as possible, man. I mean, obviously, keep your logical reasoning grounded. I don't know, can you have logic that's not grounded? There's a question for you. I'm not even gonna think about that. This is getting too long. Okay, moving on. All right, so basically, interpretation is what's gonna help us unlock the meaning of whatever the hell it is we're doing. It's gonna broaden our knowledge base of our subject. And that's going to allow us to uncover valuable insights that contribute to our own intellectual growth and personal development, which then in turn turns into a positive situation that will affect other people around you, which will make other people around you be more willing to share their interpretations, maybe on a more objective level than initially found in the first place. Yeah, all of this actually turns into a very positive situation if you follow all the stuff that we just covered in interpretation. Now, all of this is great. All of the tools we've covered so far are the foundational pillars of everything that will help build up our arguments for whatever subject we are covering. Now, once we've got all that going, now we got to tell somebody about it. Now we have to communicate it. This is where a lot of people absolutely fail. Like this video is failing. But that's okay. We'll keep moving on. We all learn from our mistakes. Making this video was obviously a mistake. Now this is the interesting tool that you have to learn. And it's one you probably don't really think about ever, because you might already be under the assumption that you're perfect at this. I promise you, you're not. You can always improve something. Now, explanation is the last tool that we are going to cover in critical thinking. How the heck do we get all of our thoughts, interpretations, analyzations, etc., how do we get all of that communicated to somebody else in such a way that they understand what we're trying to get at? Now, this is important because a lot of people, especially nowadays, have lost a lot of our communication skills with a human-to-human type of situation, right? It's no secret that society is slowly breaking down due to the internet breaking and destroying that kind of human to human interaction. That stuff is going away. Now you may not think that matters, but what's interesting is that we can use our critical thinking skills to prove that this loss of human to human interaction is bad. Now we could talk about that later. I won't go into it, but that stuff pisses me off. But anyway, you need to be able to convey your ideas well to somebody else. So this video, or this whatever the hell this talk is probably not a great example of a good way to communicate skills to somebody else. But we got to practice. So this is my way of practicing. So let's cover communication. Let's give some basic points on what you can think about while you are trying to convey your idea to other people out there. And if you need to say it out loud, say it out loud. Communication is important. Good communication is important. Positive communication is important. Insightful, non-judgmental communication is important. Remember those. Now, let's go through what we can do to become better communicators so we can get our ideas across to other people so that we can share them and get their ideas back to us so that we can then grow not only our ideas or our theories or whatever, but ourselves as well. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that our thoughts are not in a jumbled mess. This is the hard part, I think, for a lot of people, including myself. If you haven't noticed, I'm all over in this stupid video. All right? You might have a ton of stuff going on in your head all at once. I have no doubt that you do, especially if you are an ancient historical researcher. You know how much crap we have to learn that we have to take into account to even begin to grasp any single century or era in the past that we're trying to figure out? It's amazing. It is amazing how much you truly have to know if you're going to make any clear, concise judgments on any of this. So consider your main points or messages you want to convey first. Then structure those thoughts in a logical order to make sure you create a clear flow of information. Make sure that it's not all jumbled up like I'm talking right now. This takes practice. You have to make sure that whatever's coming out of your mouth, and this is like speaking to people, by the way. You know, you can write a paper and that's fine, but it's important to engage with people. And we'll go over engagement with people later, but this is important. Now, to do all of that, you want to make sure that you use clear and concise language. Now, I am not the greatest speaker here, obviously. This video pretty much proves that. But now, I am not the greatest speaker on the planet. Pretty sure this trash video displays that to everybody out there. But doesn't mean that we can't work on that. So when we want to focus on using clear and concise language when we speak. So I'm over here jumbling over myself here and there. You see that. The reason why I'm not editing all of this out is because this is just how I have to learn. So you have to deal with me learning. But it's important to know that I'm learning with you, or I'm practicing with you. I'm not just saying this crap to say it. I'm doing it. Doing it right there with you. So choosing our words carefully is important. Using our clear and straightforward language is important. One of the main things that you want to do when you start to talk to somebody, when you engage with an individual or with an audience or whatever, avoid using all that garbage jargon and technical terms that ultimately may just confuse people. You know how pretentious and obnoxious that crap is? Don't do it. Just be real. Get your point across. Be concise. Just get it across. All right, you want to make sure that you're expressing your ideas in as a succinct manner as you possibly can. Now, we're standing in front of somebody, we're standing in front of an audience, whatever, you're talking to somebody. Remember to consider your audience. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you're tailoring your communication to your audience. You want to consider their level of knowledge. You want to consider their background and the situation you guys are discussing. And you also want to think about how familiar is this person with what I'm talking about. You want to adapt your language and your style to ensure that whatever it is you're talking about is easily understood and relevant to your audience. So don't go off on a tangent about something that's maybe only half relevant to the subject, like I've done in this video. Don't do that. I'm a perfect example of what not to do. So make sure you have a basic understanding of who you're dealing with. And if not, you probe around them, right? You can ask them basic questions to get an idea of what level they are operating on within the subject that you want to discuss. Well, you know what? That's a whole other video, dealing with people, engaging with people. We'll talk about that later. Just remember, consider your audience, all right? Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to provide context to whatever the heck we're talking about. So we want to make sure that we are offering relevant context to help our audience understand our background and the significance of our thoughts. We want to make sure that we provide the necessary background information, key terms, any kind of data or evidence that we have, or reference relevant examples to give our thoughts proper context. Make sure you're putting some effort into bringing your audience into the fold of whatever you're talking about. Now, the next thing we can do to help with all of this is you can use visual aids. Now, once again, if you're talking with somebody person to person, that might not be as easy as I make it sound right here. But if you're talking to an audience, you probably have access to something that you can show up on a screen. So don't be afraid to use this stuff. I'm not saying make a 12-hour long, PowerPoint that goes, don't do crazy stuff. But having visual aids such as like diagrams, charts, slides, pictures, anything that you can find that is relevant, directly relevant to your subject, is going to help enhance clarity and understanding for whatever it is you're talking about. So basically, visual representations can help illustrate complex concepts, provide visual cues, and support whatever it is that you're verbalizing. A lot of people are visual. So if you have the opportunity to show somebody something, not just tell them, but show them, then you're already ahead of the curve in a lot of respects, and it's going to make communicating with your audience much easier. Now, everything we've gone over so far deals with talking to somebody, showing somebody something, you conveying information to an audience. There's a flip side to this, though, as well. Now, we need to make sure that we are active listeners. Effective communication is going to involve listening to other people around us. It's going to be important to pay attention to your audience's responses, questions, body language. Keep an eye on them. Are they interacting with you in a positive way? Are they wincing at what you are saying? Are they disgusted at what you're saying? How are they reacting to the things that you are presenting? They may not be verbalizing these things, so it's important to watch body language. They might be yelling at you. In that case, you can just sit there and listen. But you want to make sure that you're paying attention to all of those aspects, not just the verbal communication that you receive, but also the physical communication that you receive. Once again, we'll talk about more of this in a completely different video because that is a skill in and of itself, but just keep in mind that active listening is important. Remember, physically listening, verbally listening. You get all that? Good. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we are encouraging questions, and we want to make sure that we seek clarification if our audience seems a little uncertain or confused. We want to make sure that we're open to addressing any misunderstandings and provide further explanations or examples if needed. This is something that we deal with a lot in historical research, trying to get people on board with what we're talking about, especially if you are trying to convey brand new ideas within a subject that may already be technically locked down by either the mainstream or the alt academic side. Don't be afraid to be open to addressing any misunderstandings, because they're going to happen. They are going to happen. I promise. Especially with ancient historical history, because people already have so many different conceived notions of things and concepts that for you to try to convey something new to a lot of people, it's going to be difficult. So you need to make sure that you are prepared to get rid of any misunderstandings and provide further explanations or examples as needed to help clarify whatever it is you're talking about. I can't stress enough that effective communication is a two-way process. It has to be both directions. Have you ever sat there and just listened to somebody talk at you, especially from a archaeological point of view, to where they are unmoving and they're just telling you how it is and there's no other way it could be and you better shut up and listen. Like, how annoying is that? You just want to reach out and start choking them. So don't be that person. Be open to not only talking to somebody, showing somebody your ideas, but listening to them as well. And we'll talk more about these skills in another talk later. So make sure that there is a two-way process going at all times when you are dealing or communicating your subject. So let's wrap up communication. Communication is obviously important. I don't believe there's any way you can make an argument that says communication is negative. So if you're one of those people that currently have a difficulty communicating your ideas, this is something you need to work on. And the reality is, it's something we all have to work on for the rest of our lives. All right, let's end this. So in summation of communication, let's go over the basics. Don't forget these things. Don't forget, keep your thoughts organized. Use clear and concise language when speaking with people. Consider your audience. Remember who they are. And be humble. Provide context for whatever it is you are talking about. Use visual aids when you can. Make sure your communication is generally structured. Employ active listening skills. It's a two-way street. This is the only way that we will get the truth, is if we work together. And we need to make sure that we are practicing all of this all the time. You practice those bullet points that I've gone over ad nauseum. You practice every day and you will become a better communicator. If you become a better communicator, you can then use your communication skills to gather more information from other people that can then be used to add to your repertoire that you will employ critical thinking against, which means that you will get more information and you can build up more stuff to build up something else, blah, blah, blah. So make sure you're doing your best to communicate. And listen. Now at this point, you should basically be an amazing expert, because I know you're already practicing all of this, and this is like the 20th time you're listening to this because you're so thirsty to gain even more knowledge and to get better at it that you just can't stop listening to it. That's right. I know it. You know it. So let's cover the last part of critical thinking. Let's go over the process. Now, critical thinking is not a random or haphazard process. We have a systemic and deliberate approach that we must apply if we're going to use it correctly. The first step in the critical thinking process is clearly identifying our problem or question. We need to make sure that we're clearly defining our problem that requires our critical thinking skills. Make sure you have a focus. Don't be vague. The more vague you are, the more all over the map you're going to be, which means the more information you're going to have to bring in to try to crunch to figure something out. Focus on a problem that is clear. Ask a clear question. Once we've asked our clear question, or we have identified our problem as clear as possible, then we can go out and start gathering our information. Now, the advantage of having a clear identified problem means that we're going to focus only on a certain set of evidence. So we don't have to go all over hell and back looking for stuff for whatever our problem or situation is. So once we have that locked down, we can go and we collect relevant information, data, evidence from as reliable sources as we can find. Be as thorough as you can in your research. Once we have gathered all of our information, now it's time for us to analyze it. We want to break down everything that we've gathered into smaller components to understand their basic structure and their relationships to one another. At this point, we want to make sure that we are identifying key arguments, assumptions, and we want to make sure that we are filtering out any possible evidence that maybe doesn't fit even after even though we have a clear question. You might still find evidence that isn't quite right. Don't be afraid to filter things out during your analysis. That is what your analysis should be doing. After we've done all of that, the next thing we want to do is we want to evaluate the information that we've gathered. At this point, we want to assess the quality, reliability, and the relevance of the information or arguments presented to us. We need to scrutinize our sources and critically analyze all of the evidence at this point, using our evaluation skills, which I already talked about. Now, at this point, we have used 4 of the parts of the process for critical thinking. Identify the problem, gather information, analyze the information, evaluate the information. What's interesting here at this point, especially for us ancient history researchers, is that we're going to find that there are probably more than one interesting outcome from all the evidence that we've been analyzing. And that's okay, because it's going to be a reality of your historical research. If we had the answer, we wouldn't be doing this. There would be no alternative possibilities. So generating alternative explanations is okay. And don't be afraid to do that. You can have as many as you want, just as long as they're backed up by logic, reasoning, evidence, etc. Multiple outcomes is not indicative of you failing. Don't forget that. That just gives you more pathways to go explore using critical thinking skills. All right, now, we've gone through all the processes. We're at the last one. At this point in time, we've used all of our skills to follow the critical thinking processes. And what do we wind up with? Well, we wind up with an idea, a conclusion. We wind up with an end result of whatever it is we've been working on. So what the hell do we do with that? We have to do something with it. There's 2 things we do. The first thing is important. We implement our conclusions or ideas back into our system of thinking, reasoning, logic, etc. Right? Hopefully we've made some progress. Now we need to feed that back into how we operate. The second part of this is you also need to take your new ideas and conclusions and you need to get them out to other people. You don't be stingy with this stuff. Go bounce this off of other people. Get out there. I don't care. Write a paper, communicate, talk with people in some form or fashion or another. Because all of your conclusions might spark other stuff from other people, which could then in turn build your stuff up. So remember, communication is important. That's part of one of our skills that we need to work on. This is why. Because we need to do something with our conclusions, and they cannot just live in our brain. There's no point for them. There's no point in the world for you to make an awesome conclusion, something you found some truth, and then die with it. That helps nobody. So communicate your ideas, give it back to the community. And that is how we will all lead ourselves to the truth. Because ancient historical truth is extremely important. I cannot stress that enough in this day and age. And there's so much being hidden. There is so much obfuscation by... Communicate your ideas. It is important for higher reasons than you may initially believe. All right, now that's our critical thinking talk. This has gone on long enough. If you're still here, fantastic. My recommendation is if you've lasted this long, that means you at least care a little bit about this. So what you need to do now is go find other resources that can teach you even deeper ways to enhance and advance your critical thinking skills. This is something that cannot stop in your life. It has to go on forever. Remember, constantly challenge yourself. Constantly ask questions. I don't care if you think you have the answer. Question that answer. Question it. There is no reason not to. Do not let your ego get in the way. All right, let's finish this. Let's get on with life. Do not forget how important it is to share your findings. Stay open-minded. Question everything constantly. I know I've already said that, but I'm going to keep saying it because far too many times people stop questioning once they think they have discovered what they consider the truth. In ancient historical studies, it is almost impossible for us to know the true, absolute truth. So we must continue to question everything. Now be good to everyone around you. Stay positive. Don't let yourself get down with dumb setbacks. Just keep going. I want to hear what you discover. I want to read your paper. I want to see your YouTube video. I want to see whatever cool stuff you find. All of this is extremely important. Not just because it's fun or interesting, but because of the ramifications of understanding our true past literally has the potential to change how we think of who we are as humans. Now, you may not fully grasp the weight of that statement, but keep it in the back of your mind. Because as you continue with your ancient historical studies, you're going to be running into situations that, oddly enough, do affect that. Now get going. Build the community. Be the change that you want to be. We're all here to help each other. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. We're all here for each other.